Heartache. Laurie graduated from college with honors. The Marches and his grandfather were there to see him give a big speech. When Joe returned home, she met him for a walk, but did not hold his arm as usual. Soon the talk between them was silent. "You must take a good long vacation," Joe said. "I plan to," Laurie said. Joe looked at him and saw him staring at her in a way, and she knew the dreaded moment had come. She said, "No, Teddy, please don't." "I will," he said, taking her hand. "You must hear me. We've got to talk about it." Joe sighed and promised she would listen.
Laurie said, "I've loved you ever since I've known you, Joe. I can't wait any longer to tell you." "I never wanted to make you care for me," Joe said. "I don't understand why I can't love you as you want. I've tried, but I can't change how I feel." "Is this true, Joe?" Laurie asked. Joe said, "Really, truly, dear." Laurie dropped her hands and turned to go. "I'm so sorry," Joe said. "People can't make themselves love someone." "Laurie, I want to tell you something." "No!" Laurie cried. "Don't tell me that you love that old man." Laurie told her that he was talking about the professor she was always writing about from New York.
Joe laughed. "He isn't old or anything bad. He's just the best friend I have next to you. I haven't the least idea of loving him or anyone else." "I'll never love anyone else," Laurie shouted. Joe told him she still had not said what she wanted to say. Having hope in his heart, he sat down on the grass at her feet. "Everyone expects it of us. I can't go on without you. Say you will marry me and let's be happy," Laurie said. "I don't believe I will ever marry," Joe said. "I'm happy as I am." Laurie jumped up and said, "You'll be sorry someday, Joe."
As he rowed away in his boat on the river, Joe went straight to Mr. Lawrence and told him what happened. When Laurie came home, he played so sadly on the piano, his grandfather went to him and put kind hands on his shoulders. "I know what has happened," Mr. Lawrence said. He told Laurie that the best thing to do was to go away for a while. He had promised that Laurie could travel after college. Laurie sighed and said sadly, "It doesn't matter where I go or what I do."
Chapter 15, Beth's Secret. Joe could see the change in Beth when she came home that spring. Her heart was sad at the sight of Beth's thin face. Her skin looked almost as if you could see through it. Joe showed Beth her savings for the mountain trip, but Beth begged not to go so far from home. She agreed to another small visit to the seashore. Joe and Beth went alone since Marmee did not want to leave her grandbabies. One day, when Joe thought Beth was asleep, she looked for color in Beth's cheeks, but saw none. It came to her that Beth was slowly drifting away from her.
Beth looked up at her and said, "Joe, I'm glad you know. I've tried to tell you, but I couldn't. Don't be sad about me." "Is this why you were so unhappy in the fall?" Joe asked. "Yes," Beth said. "I gave up hoping then, though I tried to pretend it wasn't so. When I saw you all so strong and full of plans, it was hard to feel I could never be like you." "Oh, Beth," Joe could only cry. "I didn't want to frighten you when Marmee was so worried about Meg, and with Amy away and you happy with Laurie, I thought you loved him, and I went away because I couldn't," cried Joe. Beth was surprised. "He could never be anything but a brother to me." "You must get well," Joe said. "I want to. I try every day, but every day I seem to get a little worse."
Beth made Joe promise to tell her family when they got home, but Joe hoped they wouldn't see it on their own. Beth was quiet. "I don't know how to say this, but I believe I was never intended to live as long. I never had plans for when I grew up like you, or ever thought about being married. I'm not afraid, but I feel I will be homesick for you even in heaven." Joe said, "Amy is coming home in the spring, and you shall be ready to see her. I'm going to have you well by then." But Beth said, "Don't hope anymore. It won't do any good. We will enjoy being together while we can and have happy times."
Joe leaned down to kiss Beth's sweet face. She dedicated herself completely to taking care of Beth. When they got home, Mother and Father saw what they had hoped was not true. Beth went straight to bed. Father leaned his head against the fireplace and did not turn. Mother held her arms out to Joe as if for help. Joe ran to comfort her without a word.
Chapter 16. New Impressions. On Christmas Day in Nice, France, it was a beautiful day for a walk. A tall young man walked slowly. There were plenty of pretty girls to see, but he didn't pay attention except to look at the same blonde girl or someone in a blue dress, as if watching for someone. Then a woman hurried down the streets. The young woman, a blonde, was dressed in blue. He waved his hat at her like a little boy. "Laurie, is it really you? I thought you'd never get here," Amy cried. Laurie said, "I promised to spend Christmas with you, and here I am." They climbed into a carriage and drove away as Amy told him about the Christmas party at their hotel that evening. He told her how he had spent a month in Berlin, then joined his grandfather in Paris. He will be there with friends for the winter.
Laurie explained that his grandfather hated to travel, and he hated to stay still. So while Mr. Lawrence stayed with friends, Laurie could travel and then go back to see him. He praised Amy when she spoke French and told her how charming she was. Amy blushed, but she still didn't like the new way he spoke. She wished he had stayed more like the boy he had been. Amy went to the post office to get letters from home. She was so sad to hear that Beth was doing poorly and thought about going home, but Mother had told her to stay. That night, she dressed up very nice. She saw her old friend Laurie in a new light, not as our boy, but as a handsome young man. She wore an old white silk ball gown. She put up her hair and put bunches of azalea flowers in her skirts. When Laurie arrived, he complimented her, and she complimented how nice he looked too.
He gave her flowers in a little holder for her rest. They danced together until others came to dance with her. When he sat down to watch as she danced, he studied her and decided that little Amy was going to make a very charming woman. When she was done dancing, Laurie hurried away to bring her some food. He devoted himself to her for the rest of the evening. Their interest in one another grew, even without them knowing. But soon Amy began to see things in Laurie that she did not like. He promised to go visit his grandfather, but he did not. She and her aunt began calling him Lazy Lawrence, but it did not bother him. He also told her about how Joe did not love him in the way he loved her. Then he got angry when Amy called him Teddy, the name Joe always called him. They argued back and forth until finally Amy gave him the sketch that she'd been working on.
He stared at the long, lazy figure on the grass, with half-shut eyes and a listless face. "You draw so well," he said. "It's me." Amy laid another sketch beside it. "That is as you are, and this is as you were." The older sketch was full of life and spirit. It was of him taming a horse, and his attitude was full of energy and meaning. He blushed from the lesson she had given him. They laughed and talked all the way home. When he bent to kiss her hand, she told him to be himself. He gave her a hearty English handshake as before. The next morning, he sent her a note. It said, "Tell your aunt goodbye. Your lazy Lawrence has gone to his grandfather. Have a wonderful winter." "I'm glad he's gone," Amy said. Her smile turned to a frown as she looked around the empty room. "I am glad, but I will miss him.